We're doing another top 5 list for TDS, and this time we should have done something instead of the top 5 mini bosses for TDS, but finally the top 5 best final bosses in TDS.
Number 20.
Into the number 5 spots we have is intermediate and casual game mode. We're mostly going to be focusing on intermediate mode because this was literally the one beforehand. So yeah, intermediate mode. The reason why I'm putting intermediate at the number 5 spot and not like something like Molten or even like the furry game mode or whatever is mainly because of just how creative the enemy designs are. Now, as we all know, zombies are zombies, pretty much, I don't know, a human being who is, well, just an undead version of them. Like, for an example, this Berserker dude, who's probably my most favorited one in entire intermediate one. Even though his name is not Berserker, I do like his design, literally looking like a creation straight from hell, a lab from hell, more or less. And the index for him is bugged for some reason, I don't know why. Even though there's some pretty good enemies in this game mode, it is kind of fast-paced, which is something that is a little bit of a challenge, especially for people who want to have a pretty-ish, medium-ish time, but also kind of a challenging time if you know what I mean. Then there's the final boss, and this guy is quite honestly not that bad as well. He for some reason just has some upgrades, I guess, and in the lore he's apparently the guy who started all of the zombie virus, so you basically get to deal with like the final boss of who basically created this entire outbreak all over the world, I'm assuming. And once you get him down to like 50% HP, just like all normal bosses, he goes Super Saiyan, or at least he's the first boss to go Super Saiyan and starts to actually heal himself per second. Quite honestly, this boss game mode is quite fun, and I always like to play it every now and again, especially for the enemies.
Number 14.
Making their way into the number 4 spot is the Molten game mode, or more specifically, Molten Warlord boss. Now, as we all know, back in the early days, or pretty much back for like a few months or something like that, Molten has always been known for the longest amount of time, for many years, that is being the best and easiest game mode in the game. Literally easier than easy mode itself. It was just downright easy to just play this game mode, and quite honestly, every single time you beat this game mode, you would earn 500 coins. It was just such a like easy and like not at all challenging game mode at all. But then they decided to give this guy a rework, and Jesus Christ, they have definitely given this guy the rage and fury he's been feeling all of these years from getting shit on from all of the other bosses and players, and finally decided to kick everyone's asses. For an example, we have the giant guard-ish dude, which is something we haven't seen so far, apart from like, you know, Fallen or whatever, and those Guardians. And quite honestly, this guy's not that bad, especially all the other enemy bosses, and for some reason there's dogs. I don't really know why there's dogs more specifically, but yeah, there's dogs, and there's a bunch of other creative, fiery, molten enemies in this game mode. The boss, on the other hand, the final boss, Molten Warlord, is quite honestly pretty epic. He literally does look like a Warlord Molten dude. Now, sadly, we don't have the Guardians anymore for this guy. Doing earthquakes, shooting meteor showers, going Super Saiyan. This guy is quite honestly a very tricky boss, especially when he first came out, but quite honestly, not that bad, and it's always a blast to always play this game with.
Number 7.
Okay, this is a very controversial pick, but number 3 we have is the Void Reaver, aka Hardcore mode. Now, I know most of you guys are already about to say, what? How is this guy number 3, not like number 1 or number 2? Well, more specifically, this is just a biased list, obviously. And secondly, I don't like playing hardcore anymore. After losing so many times to him and finally beating him, I now get PTSD flashbacks whenever someone mentions Void Reaver or hardcore to me. So yeah, there's some negative points to that guy. But anyway, let's get into hardcore. So specifically, this game mode is pretty much the final, I guess, game mode challenge in the entire game for anyone who's willing to just go into for the test. It is a lot more difficult than all of the game modes that you have seen, like Polluted Wasteland, Fallen, and Molten game modes, because not only are you given like fast-paced enemies that pretty much raise in difficulty very fast and early on, but you're also giving many debuffs very early on, such as things are much more expensive, such as upgrades, placing towers down. There's a lot of debuffs that can go on, and quite honestly, it does get very difficult. and of course is a very high challenge, especially when this game mode is the only game mode currently that goes past 40 waves, 50 waves in total, where you finally beat the final boss of the game, this giant samurai looking galactic dude. Quite honestly, it was pretty fun playing against this guy and beating his ass, but god damn it dude, it is very much difficult, and that kind of is some negative points there, since it's not really entertaining to play this one all the time, but it can be fun for people who want a very difficult challenge in this game.
Number 5.
Another rework in the way to the number 2 spot we have is the Fallen game mode, or as you could say, Fallen King. This guy has always been known as the final boss, and I guess the main kind of game, I would suppose, or something like that, mainly because of just the badge. He says, the badge lore description, it says defeating the leader of the army, and quite honestly, it is pretty accurate to this guy. He is literally the king of, well, all of the armies that you have fought. Molten, Intermediate, and also the enemies are a lot more, I guess, knight looking, if that makes sense. And there's also a brand new enemy feature that you can actually see, and that is the whole attracting all nearby towers to actually shoot them, which is quite interesting since this is the only game mode so far, or at least any from the holiday ones, that actually features this. However, I don't like at all the speedy boss design. I don't know why they switched this behemoth looking guy to just this football looking player. I really don't like it at all. The final boss is quite honestly pretty hectic as well, since he has many fallen guardians that attack many towers with a single slice. The Fallen King able to resurrect some skeletons, being able to slice and dice all nearby towers. Quite honestly, it's a pretty fun time, and there is an evolution variant of this guy, the purple looking thing. I looked into what it gives you necessarily for beating that game mode, and it turns out it's just only a badge, so yeah, I'm definitely not attempting that anytime soon, but it is a pretty fun Easter egg to try to actually beat him in his Super Saiyan form if you want an even better challenge. Quite honestly, a very good final boss to end the main campaign.
Number 1.
Check this out.
There is no argument, change my mind. This is Polluted Wasteland and or Polluted Monster. This by far is the best game mode and the best boss in the entire game of TDS. No questions asked, no debates. This is the best in every way possible. So, this is basically the final game mode before you go off, of course, like hardcore. And quite honestly, beating this is not an easy task, especially given the limited amount of space you actually have around the map. Especially how this is basically the first map where the enemies do circles around locations where you can place down your troops in order to get to the hole in the wall, or building as you could say. And there's a lot of enemies that come in that are pretty beefy, like for an example, the hazmats, then you have the amalgamation, I can't remember exactly, and quite honestly, he is a pretty creative and very terrifying boss. Then you've got many other enemies that comes down the road, specifically the best mini boss, and that is the Abomination. This guy is a blast going into Super Saiyan super fast. Quite honestly, hopefully he never disappears. And then you have the final boss in the game, Polluted Monster. And this guy is also pretty damn beefy as well. It's also guardians that also take a beating, dealing decent amounts of damage to actually take down the main big guy himself. He literally shoots out a giant laser, does a giant ground slam, and even does some weird projectile thing. I don't really know what's going on there. And of course, when beating him, you get a huge amount of gold coins for beating him. It is just a blast playing this game mode every single time. The enemies, the music, and well, of course, the final boss. The reason why I'm making this video, quite honestly, is because, yeah, they're reworking Polluted Wasteland, which is a nightmare. Please, 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 don't get rid of Abomination.